So Steve Witkoff is running the negotiations between Israel and Hamas on behalf of America and the Trump administration. He seems like a perfectly nice, reasonable guy. The only problem is that my sense is he assumes that everyone is perfectly reasonable and nice. And this is a fundamental error when you're dealing with radical ideologues. And here he is in an interview saying that he was duped by Hamas, that he thought that they could be reasonable and reasoned with. There's also a quote of him talking about Qatar, saying that they're good and decent people. And I want to deal with both of those things head on. Let's start off with the issue of Hamas. He says he was duped by Hamas. Clearly, he seems to think they're reasonable. I want to show you him and then Mossab Hassan Youssef, the son of a Hamas co-founder, who grew up in the heart of Hamas, who knows them inside out. Let's get to the bottom first of whether Hamas can be reasoned with and negotiated with, because I would actually argue the very premise of negotiation with these people is absurd. Have a watch.
It's broken there. I know that you said Hamas has been unreasonable in trying to respond to another round of the next phase of a ceasefire. Where do we go from here? What are the odds you get them back to the table and get these hostages home?
Well, I certainly hope we get everybody back to the table and get the hostages home. I was in Doha. I met with many of the Arab leaders at the Arab Summit. I thought we had a deal, an acceptable deal. I even thought we had an approval from Hamas. Maybe that's just me getting duped. But I thought we were there, and evidently we weren't. So this is on Hamas. The United States stands with the state of Israel. There's just that's a 100% commitment, and we've expressed that. Hamas had every opportunity to demilitarize, to accept the bridging proposal that would have given us a 40 or 50-day ceasefire where we could have discussed demilitarization and a final truce. There were all kinds of opportunities to do that, and they elected not to. And this becomes the alternative. And it is unfortunate. Do I think would we be amenable to a reach out from Hamas? Of course we would be. And no different than in the Russian conflict. We want to end the killing. But we need to be clear who the aggressor is here, and that is Hamas.
Well, and quickly, I want to.
So talking about, well, we're open to going back to negotiations. We're open to all this stuff. It's very dangerous thinking, very dangerous indeed, because thinking that you can even trust them to stick to an agreement, thinking that these are people who think the way that you do and reason the way that you do is very, very dangerous indeed. The same thing is true of Qatar, by the way. But first of all, let's just talk about Hamas. This is Mossab Hassan Youssef explaining how Hamas really work and why they can't be negotiated with.
Embedded with Hamas before you were, well, first you were with Hamas and then you were embedded with Hamas on behalf of the Shin Bet. What can you tell us about what motivates these people? What are they like? What are the leaders of Hamas like? What do they want?
Well, they are a religious movement. And this is what everybody is afraid to say. If Hamas was a political movement, then we can satisfy their political ambition. But Hamas is a religious movement that does not believe in political borders. You know, they want to establish an Islamic state on the rubble of the state of Israel. They want to annihilate the Jewish people and the Jewish state. They want to kill everybody who support Israel, then establish an Islamic state. But this is not the end, because their ambition is global. They want to establish eventually an Islamic state, a global state. So this is what's on their mind. And we know that we cannot satisfy their ambition. And the more power, we give them, the more aggressive they are going to be. Hence, we cannot give Hamas what they want. We cannot give them what they are asking for, whatever it takes. In war, people die. And we need to prepare public. I say that this is an ugly war. Israel did not start it, but Israel will end it.
It's funny, I find it hard to see how Witkoff could represent the way that Trump would deal with Hamas. He says no more dribs and drabs with hostage releases. He says, Israel, do whatever you need to do. And Witkoff says, yeah, no, Hamas, come back to the table. Come on, let's have a chat. Of course, he's, I think he's a good guy, a reasonable guy. I think he clearly stands with Israel, of course. But the notion that you can reason with people who they can't just be won over with a bit of political leverage. They are deeply, deeply ideological. And people are divided on this. Some people say, no, I think it ultimately just comes down to money. It comes down to basic human needs. I think often that can be a very Western way of looking at things. People aren't always that shallow. Bin Laden grew up in wealth, prestige, and yet he chose terrorism and ultimately losing his life. Certainly his comforts in order to deal with ideological ends. People need ideology, a sense of meaning and purpose and community and belonging more than they do basic physical needs, actually. We need to know why we are here. Of course, their sense of why we're here is deeply perverted. Another thing that Witkoff seems to think is that Qatar are fine. They housed Hamas for a long time. He thinks they are good and honest, but they're actually purveyors of radical Islam, terror propaganda, and they're an agent of Hamas. And actually, they are very good at duping people. He talks about being duped by Hamas. Qatar, I think, are very good at duping people into think they're just moderate, they're just sensible. Here he is on the Tucker Carlson show. Tucker Carlson, of course, hosts a lot of notorious anti-Israel, anti-Semitic people on his channel. But here he is saying what he says about Qatar. Witkoff, have a watch.
Well, I think it's important to recognize that everybody may want something. I think in the case of the Qataris, they're criticized for not being well motivated. It's preposterous. They are well motivated. They're good, decent people. What they want is a mediation that's effective, that gets to a peace goal. And why? Because they're a small nation and they want to be acknowledged as a peacemaker. And I think the president realizes that, and I realize that today. But we have to know that. If they had a different agenda, it would be important for us to know that different agenda.
Well, let's talk about their different agenda. Eitan Fishberg has pointed out some important things we need to know. Number one, here's the building in Doha lit up to commemorate the assassination of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh, celebrating him. Let's see what else we have. Number two, Sheikha Moza bint Nasser, the mother of Qatari Emir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, glorifies the Hamas leader Sinwar upon his death, saying he'll live on. 3. Qatari state-run media praised Hamas, saying on the Gaza ceasefire, it's a crushing historic victory for Hamas, a significant defeat for Israel. This is their state TV. The resistance will continue in additional rounds of fighting. 4. Qatari state-run media produced an SNL-style skit mocking the October 7th massacre. It's absolutely horrendous. And it sort of shows an IDF soldier being taken captive by Hamas. It's a disgrace. I can't even show you this. It's so disgraceful. They've indoctrinated children to supporting terrorism. That's what's happening in their school systems and children magazines. Qatari newspapers are relentlessly demonizing the US, including calling it the cursed Uncle Sam, the nation of heresy, I think, and one of the main sources of terrorism. Qatari officials calling Jews prophet killers to a standing ovation. Here they are. Number 8, the same Qatari official who sits on the regime's Shura Council said the Al-Aqsa flood, the October 7th massacre, was only the introduction.
عملية طوفان الأقصى التي بدأت ما هي إلا مقدمة للقضاء على فساد الكيان الصهيوني الثاني في الأرض، وبداية إن شاء الله لنهاية دولتهم بعد تجمعهم في أرض فلسطين، كما قال تعالى: وقلنا من بعده لبني إسرائيل اسكنوا الأرض فإذا جاء وعد الآخرة جئنا بكم لفيفا. وها هم يأتون ويتجمعون في أرض المحشر، في أرض فلسطين، أرض معركة الجيل القادم، شئنا أم أبينا. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
Funny how he calls it the land of Palestine, while Allah in the Quran calls it the land of Israel. So let's just be clear that the notion that Qatar are somehow this benign, even positive force, they're very good, I think, at duping people into thinking they're just, moderate. By the way, I have no doubt that they may be more concerned with earthly things like, power and money and shoring up their position than people on the front lines of Hamas, who are perhaps more prepared to just go full-throated ideological. But still, there's clearly a strong ideological strain that is anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, anti-Western in Qatar. And I kind of feel like you need someone with that kind of absolute clarity and political clarity and ideological clarity to be running the, I don't even want to say negotiations, mediation perhaps. The thing I still can't get my head around is I thought there was a strong American principle of you don't negotiate with terrorists. I have no doubt President Trump would accept that and agree with that. So I kind of wonder why, instead of having a negotiator, we don't just have Trump and the Israel administration just working towards defeating Hamas and bringing them to their knees where they say, please, please, just stop and we'll give the hostages. I thought that's the American way. Certainly is the Jewish way. It's what's meant to be the Jewish way. So, as I say, Witkoff seems like a good guy, but is he the guy to be running the show here? A man whose main experience is in business? I think it doesn't hurt to be in business when you want to understand how to be effective in strategy. But fundamentally, you also need to understand who it is you're dealing with.
Hi, thank you so much for watching. To watch another one, click here. To stay up to date with all our content, click here to subscribe. And if you're able to, you can help support JTV to grow and grow by clicking join below this video, where you can become a member and get perks including early access to videos and private live discussions with me. But most of all, you'll be partnering with us on our mission to change the world.